want to thank Peter and Marty just for hosting us and inviting us to join. So I'm going to get, I think right now, I'm going to probably move over here. So I'm going to give you a little bit, I thought to try to wake up everyone, we needed a little movie to get excited. So this should give you a snapshot. It's a 1-minute video about DARPA, and then we'll get on with our presentation. Please.
Coming to DARPA is like grabbing the nose cone of a rocket and holding on for dear life.
DARPA is a place where if you don't invent the internet, you only get a B.
A DARPA program manager quite literally invents tomorrow.
We are thinking about innovation unconstrained. Where can we go?
Predict what is emerging as threats.
We're looking for the applications that seem impossible.
That passion will be saving lives 5, 10, 15 years from now.
Coming to work every day and being humbled by that.
The innovation and collaboration, it's a team effort.
We're not builders of the ultimate technology.
It's the engineers and scientists at the companies and universities that we fund that ultimately are going to bend metal and write code and deliver these capabilities to the warfighters.
DARPA is not one person or one place. It's a collection of people that are excited about moving technology forward.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to share just to give you a 30-second background. So why it's so special for me to be, oops. So that kind of gives you hopefully an overview and a taste of DARPA. We're trying to bring DARPA to you today. So this is a 65-year-old agency. It was started as a response. The U.S. was surprised. We had some efforts in space, and this agency was stood up in less than, I think, 4 months. I don't think we've ever seen that speed ever again, but maybe we will. But I'm giving you just a little bit of DARPA. So we invest about $4 billion a year. And when you think about it, if you just see here, think about Siri, think about GPS, think about in telecommunications. And when I say telecom, personally for me, and why I am so excited to be here to share about our work and how we can work together, is I think about my time when I was starting out my career. It was right here in New York, and it was a technology called wireless, broadband wireless. And no one had heard about that. Everyone was digging up the streets with fiber. I still see there's traffic, so I don't think anything is, even though we've alleviated that problem, we still have a lot of traffic here in New York. But this was a technology that was invented by the Department of Defense. And I was with a very kind of a growing company. And, no one ever thought about well, why would we want to have wireless? We could just put fiber. I remember talking, and we had gone in New York in this city and put those wireless backhaul dishes, 38 gigahertz dishes in the city first. And September 11th happened. And it changed everything for everyone. And because of, I think, the incredible people here in New York and our investment community and the engineers, we were able to get service back up here and restored. And that's really how I started my career. And so it's so special for me to be here with you today. Okay, so next slide. So I'm going to share with you that kind of the next thing is, how is DARPA organized? So you saw a lot of kind of planes, but you think about, we have these 6 offices. And so you think about biology, our defense science office, we have a lot of materials. That's kind of our innovation of innovation at DARPA. Our information, we do a lot of cyber work. We have, kind of next generation AI, machine learning. Microsystems, you heard a lot about the microelectronics work that the U.S. is really trying to take that step in to be a leader on that. And then you look at our work in our STO, we call it Strategic Technology Office, and our TTO, and that's some of where we look about next generation platforms, both in space and in the air and the sea. Next slide. So we have one thing that I want you to consider about this, and I think this is a city that just, and out throughout the U.S., but what we're doing is we're really reaching out to many of you, some of you that have created companies, built companies, sold companies, some of you that have run funds, and bringing the best talent so that when DARPA has this incredible idea, we can pair that great, incredible team with a talented entrepreneur that really knows how to go scale into the market and understands how we can leverage best of breed technology key to national security and but also economic impact. And so this is an initiative that we've done. We now have over by this June, we'll have 100 programs with the Embedded Entrepreneur, and you're going to hear a little bit. I've got two very exciting people that from DARPA, performers that will be sharing with you their work. Next slide. Okay. So, yes.
You said prosperity. Is it either security or prosperity, or it has to be security first?
No, we don't determine that. So, like for example, DARPA, we have a program. You'll enjoy this. One is how do you take from the air and create water in remote environments, right? And you saw that. So now someone would argue, well, why is DARPA doing that? Or we have another program that's breaking down garbage, and we're figuring out how you can extract protein from that as a source. And so that might be very much serving the broader societal impact, or giving a unique capability. But also longer term, you think if we have military and they might need to be in a remote area that might need water or might need to figure out how to make a food source. So we don't determine that. Does that help?
Yep.
Okay. So this, as I shared with DARPA, started this program about 2.5 years ago. And if you look at this, we've seen a tremendous, by bringing in the top entrepreneurial talent with our programs, we've seen a huge growth. And so we have about 100 participants. And within the last year, I think we had family offices. I love family offices, a big fan. We've secured about a $527 million. We've also had 3 large acquisitions that aren't reflected on here of our performers, so that they can bring these great technologies both to DoD as well as the industry. So next slide. So what I'd like to share with you now, I've got, as Marty mentioned, and Peter, we have some really exciting groups. So when you think about scaling capital, this is a new initiative, and why I'm so excited about us starting to have this conversation here with your network is family offices. But when we look at the data, we see that they're 3 times more likely to invest in early stage disruptive technology. So that's like, so when I heard that, I went, this is just a match made in heaven for us. And this program, so 2 of my colleagues that are serving, JR, and I don't know if Wes might have to say hello to everyone too, but
Yes.
Wes will have to say hello. But this is a new initiative with the Secretary of Defense, and it's called the Office of Strategic Capital. It's brand new. It was just really announced in December. So you're really getting we thought that it would be really important to share this with you and really start to have that discussion. So I think you're really one of the very first groups that is hearing this brief and excited for us to start that discussion. JR is a great, this group we see with DARPA is really kind of helping, all of the family offices with their investments and really scaling those technologies. So JR, please join.
All right. Thank you very much. Welcome. It's great to be here. As someone that grew up in the 80s, there's nothing cooler than sitting next to DARPA. So thrilled to have the opportunity, and Shaq and the DARPA team have been an amazing partner here. The question was asked a second ago, is it prosperity or security? And I think our answer is yes. Kind of my view is that our national security, economic prosperity really go hand in hand. If nothing else, at a fundamental level, it's the taxpayer dollars generated out of GDP that fund the DoD, but it goes beyond that. If you look at, as a country and as a DoD, a lot of our advantage we have enjoyed for the past 6-7 decades has been built upon the technological advantage that we've had, and that technological advantage has been really funded early on through mostly kind of government programs, and then more recently through the private sector. Probably back going to the 80s, the majority of that kind of R&D and commercialization of emerging tech has come into the private sector. And so our mandate, and Secretary of Defense established this in December, is to really kind of develop the strategies around how do we kind of retool and think about private capital and how that fits into the ecosystem and how we kind of move things forward. We say kind of capability flows to returns, or capital flows to returns, and by extension capability flows to returns. And so those areas that with DARPA and others identify these future capabilities we need, we're trying to kind of put in the connecting pieces to allow kind of private capital and those who are best at allocating capital and building and growing companies and scaling industry to go get after the problem. Next slide, please. And so there's a number of significant technology areas, and these are aligned very closely with where DARPA works. that we kind of determined these are important areas for us to maintain leadership in. And it's a global competition, and this isn't particularly unique. We've had a global competition for significant technologies for really since the founding of the country. So it's something we're familiar with, and we kind of look to go back into history and see where we've successfully done this. But within the competition, within these sectors, there's a number of areas that kind of all across the world, everyone can move the ball forward, and humankind is better for it. But there's some of these areas from a competition standpoint that we really need to be serious about, where things are maybe a little more of a zero-sum game. So we're trying to kind of identify those areans and identify within those areas that we think are really important for the future of where is the market working well, where do we maybe see inefficiencies, and how can we best address those inefficiencies. So next slide. And so back to that first point about security and prosperity. So yes, both. I think we can achieve both. I think both are vitally important. That's how we kind of leverage our system, our capitalist markets here. And this isn't anything new as far as us figuring out how to do public-private partnerships. So I mean, really going back, if you look back to the early 60s, the venture ecosystem, about 2/3 of venture funds were backed by some sort of federal dollars. And a lot of that goes back to the SBIC program that the SBA runs. We'll talk about more in a minute. And if you go to the next slide, please. And just as a quick kind of story, so Cray Supercomputing was a phenomenal company that was really kind of an underdog. So as they came out in the early 70s, competing against Texas Instruments and other very large established players, they had a very long runway they had to try to get through to get that first computer off the ground. And what wasn't known is probably in the late 70s, I think by 1978, they had about 3 months of runway and were about to go bankrupt. And so they wound up getting investment from what was a public-private partnership through an SBIC program, initially about $500,000 that kind of crowded in another $2.5 million, that allowed them to get their first system off the ground. They sold their first computer to the Department of Energy, the second one to the Department of Defense. And from there, it turned into a kind of leading enterprise that really launched kind of our high-performance computing industry. And that was in great part done through a public-private partnership in a small business investment company. And in the 80s, the Cray team did a congressional testimony just stating that they would not have been successful if it wasn't for that investment. Next slide, please. Now I'll try to hit just the high points here, and then leave a little bit more for the dialogue. I know we have a diverse audience, so I want to make sure I'm touching on the points that are relevant. So if you look at where kind of DARPA and other traditionally defense and procurement programs sit, a lot of them sit in that kind of upper left area within the grants or the contract space, and we're pretty prominent there. And there's, if you look at DARPA, for example, there's probably not a better institution that can take the craziest theory and demonstrate that you can develop a prototype out of it. But from a government perspective, and particularly in the DoD, by policy, we kind of stay out of it past that. We really just leave it up to the private sector to continue to move those technologies forward. And that's certainly a focus area for Shaq and her program. Next slide. But what we've seen, and really this is kind of, in my opinion, kind of a construct coming out of Web 2.0. And for those that are managing funds, when you look at kind of TVPI and DPI metrics, it's really driven a lot of private capital and funds to focus on kind of low CapEx, quick return opportunities, which really heavily indexes towards e-commerce and other things. I mean, so AI ML is still a very prolific area, more and more capital is flowing in there. But as you get further down into some of these deeper tech areas, there's less and less private capital available to address those areas and allow the entrepreneurs and the technology builders to have access to that capital to continue moving their technologies forward. And so it's not just the DoD who's thinking about this. You can go to the next slide.
Oh, yeah.
So back to that kind of national security and economic prosperity. Jake Sullivan, our national security advisor, just kind of his direct quote: "We're investing in industries of the future and strengthening the resilience and security of the supply chain that underpin them. With each of these investments, our goal is to crowd in private capital, not replace it, and to attract patient capital," which I think is particularly relevant for today, "and to bring those technologies, critical technologies, to scale." Next slide. And so beyond national security, we look on the economic side. Brian Deese, our national economic director, one of his recent statements: "Our modern American industrial strategy reflects a commitment to make bold investments in key areas that everyone, from academics to business leaders alike, agrees are foundational to economic growth. These investments help accelerate and shape breakneck innovation, and they encourage private investment in market competition." So with that, next slide. The Secretary of Defense established this program with our goal is to attract private capital to these priorities and then scale those investments into critical technology areas. The way we're going to think about doing that, next slide, please. There's really kind of two, we'll call just broad strategies. One is syndication. This is expanding on some programs like the EI program, what other kind of innovation organizations for the DoD like AppWorks and DIU are doing. And that's kind of taking our existing authorities and funding we have to cost share in the development of some of these with private capital. What's kind of net new for the DoD, and we were looking at is kind of the next one, looking at leverage. This is anything from the SBIC program, which we'll talk to you a little bit more in a second, or partnering with kind of existing federal credit programs to provide lower cost, more patient capital into these areas. Next slide, please. So we're in this competition, but a great example is something that happened elsewhere, and TSMC is kind of an example we'll use. So Dr. Morris Chang was actually US educated at MIT and Stanford, was at Texas Instruments for about 25 years, and then went over to Taiwan when they established TSMC. Originally, it was essentially a government-owned organization, and what the government of Taiwan said is, hey, we will match whatever private capital you raise to get this off the ground. And so he went out and raised $100 million, predominantly from ASML. And then the Taiwanese government put $100 million. And when this kicked off, Morris Chang was actually just a government employee before it spun out. But the success of that has obviously been, a foundational difference. And it wasn't necessarily the technology that was different. It was actually a business model innovation. I'll go with designless fab. So again, it's not new. It's something that's going to be used around the world. And we're kind of exploring opportunities kind of within our structure of what's a great way for us to get after these problems from a public-private partnership. Next slide. Potentially most relevant here is kind of the first program that we've launched. And this is in partnership with the SBA, who's just been an absolutely incredible partner to us. And it's launching the Small Business Investment Company Critical Technology Initiative. Now, there's a lot of people here, I imagine the audience are familiar with SBICs. They've been around since 1958. And they've taken on kind of different forms over the years. But generally speaking, the way it works, you go out and raise capital as an LP. We will come in and then essentially provide lower cost of capital and kind of lever that up to a certain degree for you then to go invest. So we are retooling that within the constructs of kind of some additional rule changes and deploying it into these critical technology areas. So some of that has remained to be kind of formally established. We hope to publish the final rules here in March and roll out initial applications in probably early summer to kind of partner with this. And there's a bunch of really interesting components to this that we think will be interesting to the audience here that we'll probably get into here in just a minute. And last slide, next one, please. So what's next for us? We're going to be opening up this critical technology initiative. I think we'll talk about a little more detail in a second. We'll be publishing our investment strategies, and then we have kind of additional partnerships and tools that we'll be rolling out both internally to the DoD and then through partnerships.
Do you envisage equity participation, or are you it's gonna be loans and grants?
Well, so I would say it depends on how we're rolling it out. So right now, we're kind of exploring really across the capital stack and across the ecosystem of what's the best way for us to participate. There was certainly kind of recent legislation that came out of the Senate. There was kind of proposals of us kind of going in from an equity standpoint. I think that's ultimately going to depend up to legislators and how they decide to roll that out. But really, if you look at what the DoD has competitive advantages, or the government, it's probably not picking investments and picking companies. So we want to go on to try and provide low cost of capital for those that have experience and expertise and a good track record of picking companies and growing and scaling. They're providing lower cost of capital for them to go get after these more challenging problems. So that's kind of with the SBIC construct. It wouldn't be us coming in as traditional LP. It's coming in with capital in the range of I think historically it's been 2%, 3%, 4%. So really low cost capital with kind of like a 10-year with like a 5-year option after draw for you to go get after those things. What's unique with the Critical Technology Initiative from previous programs was that if you're familiar with SBICs, usually most of those funds have turned into kind of mezz debt or private credit funds, because as soon as they draw on that facility, they've had interest payments due after that. The SBA and through the rule changes of changing that to a deferred accrual process. Right. So the interest will just accrue until you start doing distributions to limited partners, and then it's on a pro rata basis.
John and I are thinking alike. I spoke to Shaq about this last night. Spoke to Wes about it a few minutes ago. I do a lot of work with universities and lots and lots of startups. Been a patent attorney for about 25 years, but again in this space. So I'm very somewhat familiar with it and done a lot of work at the patent office. So universities, anywhere from 1% to 3% is kind of reasonable. We've had some universities ask for much more. and that's really not acceptable. But 3% cap, I think, would be something perfectly reasonable. We talked about, I'm kind of a history buff. I was in New York, went through 2008. The TARP program, from all the shows I watched about it, they actually got paid back all the money, and they made money on top of that. With the current financial crisis we're in, and just the way that our country is funded, I think we need to kind of reconsider all the programs, not just this new program, but quite frankly, NIH, National Science Foundation, DARPA itself. I don't think it's a bad thing. I looked up this morning, I didn't know this, but we learned from Shaq's presentation September of last year that Moderna, DARPA invested a certain amount of money into Moderna. If I asked everyone around the table, what's the market cap of Moderna today? I think you'd be surprised, but it's a lot. It's $68 billion. Wow. So if the U.S. government had 3% of that, and I don't know what the cap of the market cap was for Moderna, but it's $2 billion. I think it's not going to solve our budget deficits and all the financial woes, but I do think it's a good story for the American people, saying that we have to restructure this. So I think this group, John, obviously Marty, and others, could really be helpful from that standpoint, because the government, I think we should think like that. Last thing, and I'll come back, say more. Through Marty, we had Tim Draper, spoke, very well-respected investor. We introduced him to the DARPA team, and they're continuing to have a conversation. So I think Tim just one. Joe is very accomplished. Many people are accomplished investors and can really give good feedback. I think through Marty and the network, probably other people would be willing to have more smaller group meetings and provide feedback.
Draper ran SBICs, a number of SBICs until just a couple of years ago. So
I didn't know.
Right. So we've had more than 700 VCs pitch our group, and probably 1,000 plus have reached out to us, and we've done a lot of work with SBICs. So there's a guy here I can introduce you later. We had a lot of SBICs here in New York and in Texas. So Brett, I forget his last name. You probably know him. Star Capital.
Okay.
Yeah, but the argument that you're, by having government participation in equity, that you're picking winners and losers, and that shouldn't be your job. I think that's can be countered by the idea that if you're lending cheap money to people, you're enriching a bunch of people that at the expense of the taxpayer. Whereas if you're taking equity, you have a chance of enriching the taxpayer. And I think that the country's coffers, if they really are providing a judgment, in the first place, you're making a judgment about a company before you lend money. That same judgment can be applied to an equity.
Yeah, you can name 5 people like off the bat the government has made super wealthy, right? It's really, family.
So can I just want to hit on that real quick and I jump it. So that's a valid point. There's also the dynamics of because it is the government, there's political considerations that we have to kind of keep in mind. I think that I would say, yes, we're not going to get super wealthy off of debt type things, but what we are doing to solve this problem now is contracts, is grants. And so first and foremost, obviously getting paid back with interest is better than that if we're talking about being partners here. So we're working on that, premise. One of the things that and JR's kind of hinted to is we in the DoD don't really even have the authorities to make these investments at this time. We're working to learn from other agencies right now, and that's why we're partnering with the SBA. Looking at we've kind of researched all the 118 federal credit programs in the U.S. government today. The Department of Justice, Labor, and Defense do not have these authorities today.
But other countries do.
Other countries do.
Other countries do. So you have to kind of weigh that into how that is. And you think about, we talked about this at DARPA, why are we embedding entrepreneurs, right? And trying to guide, we believe in the capital markets, free markets, but we're trying to bring in that talent with people that have the mindset of dual use, and that we're trying to make sure that we have the benefit and the impact, both creating jobs, creating wealth in this country. But I will tell you that we have seen, especially in the startup or earlier stage, one thing it's very real is adversarial capital investors. And so if you have key technology that has a national security imperative, and they're small, so trying to bring in the best talent, but also being able to have the flexibility would be a tremendous benefit.
But another thing you could do, I mean, the talent exists out there. Why not make investments as LPs in funds that are designated as being copacetic with your aims? Okay, these funds are aiming at prosperity and security and health matters that may affect security, etc. And then let the experts there make the decision, yes or no. You could still continue your lending program and your all the other things you're doing, but make a profit out of being an LP with some talent.
This is a great discussion. I want to table it because we have other questions, and I got questions from the audience too.
Okay.
So do you?
I was just going to say, I'm involved with DHS. And DHS has been doing something like this for a long time. The SBA, SBIC is a new wrinkle, but I'm part of the Science and Technology Directorate, which is where all the grants similar to DARPA come out of. And the issue has always been partnering up with, private enterprise and private investors. And they did it through an entity called Homeland Business Council, which is a nonprofit arm of the DHS, which there's corporates like Raytheon, Boeing, private investors, and to try to partner up these young companies with more private or strategic capital. As far as loans, my understanding is that there are funds that will monetize R&D credits. So that's how some companies have been able to also get capital. So, I mean, I've been doing this for 25, I've been involved with DHS for 25 years.
Happy to, I don't know, Doggy, I don't know. Somebody who's walking in.
Sorry about that.
We lost our audio.
Yep.
We got it back.
Okay, you're better now?
Yep.
Okay.
We look at impact to the economy. We also look at, did this technology help the US and help the DoD have some type of competitive advantage? And then we look at different industries. So we can look at manufacturing, we can look at, do we have further research in this? Do we build up industrial base on this? And so that's how we measure that impact. Okay.
Joe, do you have a question?
Well, I mean, I have an investment in quantum, and I want to know how can this early stage company access this? What is the timeline?
So on our partners for the SBA, the Critical Technology Initiative, we expect by early summer, and that's going to be operating at a fund level. Then shortly thereafter, we'll start rolling out. So right now, we're just kind of getting the office space and people hired and those sorts of things. So there's to learn more. We have a kind of a very surface level webpage up so far. It's at cto.mil/OSC. There's a link on there. You can kind of add your info there. And as we start rolling out, we'll start sending information out. We also have an email, engagements@osc.mil. You can send a note over there as well. If you want to put IvyFON in the subject, then we'll make sure we follow up directly.
Is there a federal register notice on it? Better
You know-
register notice.
You know what?
There is for the SBA.
Yeah, you know what, Marty, what we suggest is, I know that, we really wanted to start the conversation with your group and Pete.
Yeah.
So if you want to give us, whoever wants more information, we'll put you on that list to make
Okay.
sure that you get that information out, and we would be excited. So maybe we can
Yeah,
look
we
through
should talk
you.
about ways to
Yep.
get to.
Yeah, we want to help.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you all so much for the opportunity.
And
What was the website again?
CTO.mil
CTO./OSC.
Yeah.
for Office Street.
now, Farrah, thank you so much.
Thank
And
you,
Wes,
Chair.
we really appreciate you guys.
Thanks.